Hi everyone, hope you're doing well. We are back with another chapter of Charlotte's Web today. If you remember, Charlotte has been leaving messages on her web to amaze the people of the barn and of the county so that they can know what a wonderful pig Wilbur is. And so the owner, Mr. Zuckerman, decided that he was going to enter Wilbur in the county fair as a pig, to show and to, win a prize for, okay? So today's chapter is called Dr. Dorian. Here we go. The next day was Saturday. Fern stood at the kitchen sink drying the breakfast dishes as her mother washed them. Mrs. Arable worked silently. She hoped Fern would go out and play with the other children instead of heading to the Zuckerman's barn to sit and watch the animals. Charlotte is the best storyteller I ever heard, said Fern, poking her dish towel with the cereal. Fern, said her mother sternly, you must not invent things. You know spiders don't tell stories. Spiders can't talk. Charlotte can, replied Fern. She doesn't talk very loud, but she talks. And what kind of story did she tell? Asked Mrs. Arable. Well, said Fern, she told us about a cousin of hers who was caught in a fish in her web. Don't you think that's fascinating? Fern, dear, how would a fish get into a spider web? Said Mrs. Arable. You know it couldn't happen. You're making things up. Oh, it happened all right, said Fern. Charlotte never fibs. This cousin of hers built a web across the stream. One day she was hanging around the web when a tiny fish leaped into the air and got tangled in the web. The fish was caught by one fin. Mother, its tail was wildly thrashing and shining in the sun. Can't you just see the web swaying dangerously under the weight of the fish? Charlotte's cousin kept swinging it, dodging out, and she was beaten mercifully over the head by the wild thrashing fish, dancing in, dancing out, throwing. Fern, snapped her mother. Stop it. You're inventing these wild tales. I'm not inventing, said Fern. I'm just telling you the facts. What finally happened, then? Asked her mother, whose curiosity began to get the better of her. Charlotte's cousin won. She wrapped the fish up, then she ate it when she got good and ready. Spiders have to eat, and the same as the rest of us. Yes, I suppose they do, said Mrs. Arable vaguely. Charlotte has another cousin who's a balloonist. She stands on her head, lets out the line, and is carried off in the wind. Mother, wouldn't you simply love to do that? Yes, I would, come to think of it, replied Mrs. Arable. But Fern, darling, I wish that you would play outdoors today instead of going to Uncle Homer's barn. Find some of your playmates and do something nice outdoors. You're spending too much time in that barn. It isn't good for you to be alone so much. Alone, said Fern. Alone? My best friends are in the barn cellar. It's a very social place. Not at all lonely. Fern disappeared after a while, walking down the road towards the Zuckermans. Her mother dusted the sitting room, and as she worked, she kept thinking about Fern. It didn't seem natural for a little girl to be so interested in animals. Finally, Mrs. Arable made up her mind that she would call old Dr. Dorian and ask his advice. She got in the car and drove to his office in the village. Dr. Dorian had a thick beard. He was glad to see Mrs. Arable and gave her a comfortable chair. It's about Fern, she explained. Fern spends entirely too much time in the Zuckerman's barn. It doesn't seem normal. She sits there on a milk stool in the corner of the barn cellar near the pig pen, and she watches the animals, hour after hour. She just sits and listens. Dr. Dorian leaned back and closed his eyes. How enchanting, he said. It must be real nice and quiet down there. Homer has some sheep, doesn't he? Yes, said Mrs. Arable, but it all started with that pig we let Fern raise on a bottle. She calls him Wilbur. Homer bought the pig, and ever since it left our place, Fern has been going to her uncle's to be near it. I've been hearing things about the pig, said Dr. Dorian, opening his eyes. They say he's quite a pig. Have you ever heard about the words that appeared in the spider web? Asked Mrs. Arable nervously. Yes, replied the doctor. Well, do you understand it? Asked Mrs. Arable. Understand what? Do you understand how there could be writing in a spider web? Oh, no, said Dr. Dorian. I don't understand it. But for that matter, I don't understand how a spider learned to spin a web in the first place. When the words appeared, everyone said they were a miracle, but nobody pointed out that the web itself was a miracle. What's miraculous about a spider web? Said Mrs. Arable. I don't see what you're saying about how the web is a miracle. It's just a web. Have you ever tried to spin one? Asked Dr. Dorian. Mrs. Arable shifted uneasily in the chair. No, she said, but I can crochet a doily and I can knit a sock. Sure, said the doctor. But somebody taught you, didn't they? My mother taught me. Well, who taught the spider? A young spider knows how to spin a web without any instructions from anybody. Don't you regard that as a miracle? I suppose so, said Mrs. Arable. I never looked at it that way before. Still, I don't understand how those words got into the web. I don't understand, and I don't like what I can't understand. None of us do, said Dr. Dorian, sighing. I'm a doctor. Doctors are supposed to understand everything, and I don't understand everything, and I don't intend to let it worry me. Mrs. Arable fidgeted. Fern says the animals talk to each other. Dr. Dorian, do you believe animals talk? I never heard one say anything, he replied, but that proves nothing. It's quite possible the animals have spoken civilly to me, and I just didn't catch the remark because I wasn't paying attention. Children pay better attention than grown-ups. If Fern says that the animals in Zuckerman's barn talk, I'm quite ready to believe her. Perhaps if people talked less, animals would talk more. People are incessant talkers. I can give you my word on that. Well, I feel better about Fern, said Mrs. Arable. You don't think I need to worry about her? Does she look well? Asked the doctor. Oh, yes. Appetite good? Oh, yes. She's always hungry. Well, sleep well at night? Yes. Then don't worry, said the doctor. Do you think she'll ever start thinking about something besides pigs and sheep and geese and spiders? How old is Fern? She's 8. Well, said Dr. Dorian, I think she will always love animals, but I doubt she will spend her entire life in Homer Zuckerman's barn cellar. How about boys? Does she know any boys? She knows Henry Fussy, said Mrs. Arable brightly. Dr. Dorian closed his eyes again and went into a deep thought. Henry Fussy, he mumbled. Remarkable. Well, I don't think you have anything to worry about. Let Fern associate with her friends in the barn if she wants to. I would say, offhand, that spiders and pigs were fully as interesting as Henry Fussy. Yet, I predict that the day will come when even Henry will drop some chance remarks that catch Fern's attention. It's amazing how children change from year to year. How's Avery? He asked, opening his eyes wide. Oh, Avery, chuckled Mrs. Arable. Avery is always fine. Of course, he gets into poison ivy and gets stung by wasps and bees and brings frogs and snakes home and breaks everything he lays his hand on. But he's fine. Good, said the doctor. Mrs. Arable said goodbye and thanked Dr. Dorian so much for his advice. She felt greatly relieved. And we'll move on to chapter 15 now, the crickets. The crickets sang in the grasses. They sang the song of summer's ending, a sad, momentous song. Summer is over and gone, they sang, over and gone, over and gone. Summer is dying, dying. The crickets felt it was their duty to warn everyone that summertime cannot last forever. Even on the most beautiful days in the whole year, the days when the summer is changing into fall, the crickets spread the rumor of sadness and change. Everyone heard the song of the crickets. Avery and Fern Arable heard it as they walked the dusty road. They knew school would begin soon. And the young geese heard it, and they knew that they would never be little goslings again. Charlotte heard it and knew that she hadn't much time left. Mrs. Zuckerman, at work in the kitchen, heard the crickets, and the sadness came over her too. Another summer gone, she sighed. Lurvy, at work building a crate for Wilbur, heard the song and knew it was time to dig potatoes. Summer is over and gone, repeated the crickets. How many nights till frost, sang the crickets. Goodbye, summer, goodbye, goodbye. The sheep heard the crickets, and they felt so uneasy they broke a hole in the pasture fence and wandered up the field across the road. The gander discovered a hole and led his family through, and they walked to the orchard and ate the apples that were lying on the ground. The little maple tree in the swamp heard the cricket song and turned bright red with anxiety. Wilbur was now the center of attraction on the farm. Good food and regular hours were showing results. Wilbur was a pig any man would be proud of. One day, more than 100 people came to stand in his yard and admire him. Charlotte had written the word radiant, and Wilbur really looked radiant as he stood in the golden sunlight. Ever since the spider had befriended him, he had done his best to live up to his reputation. When Charlotte's Web said, some pig, Wilbur tried to look like some pig. When Charlotte's Web said terrific, Wilbur tried to look terrific. And now that the web said radiant, he did everything possible to make himself glow. It was not easy to look radiant, but Wilbur threw himself into the will. He would turn his head slightly and blink those long eyelashes. He would breathe deeply, and when the audience grew bored, he would spring into the air and do backflips and a half twist. And the crowd would yell and cheer. How's that for a pig? Mr. Zuckerman would ask. Well pleased with himself, that pig is radiant. Some of Wilbur's friends at the barn worried for fear that all this attention would go to his head and make him stuck up, and it never did. Wilbur was modest. Fame did not spoil him. He still worried about the future, and he could hardly believe that a mere spider would be able to save his life. Sometimes at night, he would have a bad dream. He would dream that men were coming to get him with knives and guns, but that was only a dream. In the daytime, Wilbur usually felt happy and confident. No pig had ever had truer friends, and he realized that friendship is one of the most satisfying things in the world. Even the songs of the crickets did not make Wilbur too sad. He knew it was almost time for the county fair, and he was looking forward to the trip. If he could distinguish himself at the fair, then maybe he could win some prize money. He was sure that Zuckerman would let him live. Charlotte had worries of her own, but she kept them quiet. One morning, Wilbur asked about the fair. "You're going with me, aren't you, Charlotte?" he said. "Well, I don't know," repeated Charlotte. "The fair comes at a bad time for me. I shall find it inconvenient to leave home, even for a few days." "Why?" said Wilbur. "Oh, I just don't feel like leaving my web. Too much going on around here." "Please come with me," begged Wilbur. "I need you, Charlotte. I can't stand going to the fair without you. You've got to come." "No," said Charlotte. "I believe I'd better stay home and see what work I can get done." "What kind of work?" said Wilbur. "Egg laying. It's time I made an egg sack and filled it with eggs." "I didn't know you could lay eggs," said Wilbur in amazement. "Oh, sure," said the spider. "I'm versatile." "What does versatile mean? Full of eggs?" asked Wilbur. "Certainly not," said Charlotte. "Versatile means I can turn with ease from one thing to another. It means I don't have a limit of my activities, and spinning and trapping and stunts like that." "Why don't you come with me to the fairgrounds and lay your eggs there?" pleased Wilbur. "It would be wonderful fun." Charlotte gave her web a twitch and moodily watched it sway. "I'm afraid not," she said. "You don't know the first things about egg laying, Wilbur. I can't arrange my family duties to suit the management of the county fair. When I get ready to lay eggs, I have to lay eggs, fair or no fair. However, I don't want you to worry about it. You might lose weight. We'll leave it this way. I'll come to the fair if I possibly can." "Oh, good," said Wilbur. "I knew you wouldn't forsake me just when I need you the most." All that day, Wilbur stayed inside, taking life easy in the straw. Well, Charlotte rested and ate a grasshopper. She knew that she couldn't help Wilbur much longer. In a few days, she would have to drop everything and build the beautiful little egg sack that would hold her eggs. Oh, we're nearing the end of the book. Okay, we only have a couple chapters left. The next chapter is called Off to the Fair, and we'll read that tomorrow. I can't wait. Bye.